She hammered her fist against the iron door until her knuckles bled, rain slashing her face like knives. Behind her, the cliff edge dropped into black nothing. Ahead, a man who could crush her with a word. "You can leave me to die out here," Seren shouted over the storm. "Or you can let me prove I'm not the liar they say I am. Either way, I'm not running anymore." The Duke's eyes were cold as winter stone. He didn't move. But neither did she. If you want to see how far a woman can go when she's got nothing left to lose, stick around. Drop a comment with your city so I can see where this story travels. And hit that like button if you believe some battles are worth fighting, even when the odds are stacked against you. The carriage door slammed open and Seren nearly fell out into the mud. The driver didn't wait. He tossed her single canvas bag onto the gravel and cracked the reins before she could even steady herself. The horses lurched forward, wheels spraying dirty water across her already soaked skirt. She stood there, chest heaving, watching the carriage disappear into the sheets of rain that turned the world gray and formless. Good riddance. Her legs trembled, not from cold, though she was freezing, but from the adrenaline that had kept her moving for 3 days straight. 3 days since she'd slipped out of her stepfather's house in the dead of night, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a forged letter of reference she'd written herself. 3 days of sleeping in barns, stealing bread from market stalls, and lying to every innkeeper who asked her name. And now she was here. Thornwood Estate. The end of the line. She picked up her bag and tilted her head back, squinting through the rain at the mansion looming above her. It sat on the edge of a cliff like a predator crouched to spring, all dark stone and sharp angles, windows glowing faintly against the storm. The kind of place that didn't welcome strangers, the kind of place that ate them alive. Perfect. Seren started up the long gravel drive, her boots squelching with every step. The wind tried to shove her back, but she leaned into it, jaw set. She'd come too far to turn around now. Her stepfather's voice still echoed in her head. "You'll do as I say, girl, or you'll do nothing at all." Well, she'd done something. She'd left, and she wasn't going back. The front door was massive, carved from black oak and fitted with iron hinges that looked older than the house itself. Seren raised her fist and pounded 3 times, hard enough to rattle the frame. Nothing. She pounded again. Still nothing. "Open the damn door!" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. "I know someone's in there!" A shadow moved behind one of the narrow windows beside the door. Seren held her breath. Then the lock clicked, and the door swung inward. A man stood in the doorway. Tall, severe, dressed in black from collar to boot. His face was all hard lines and sharper angles, eyes the color of slate beneath heavy brows. He looked her up and down with the kind of expression you'd give a stray dog that wandered onto your property. "We're not taking visitors," he said flatly. "I'm not a visitor." Seren stepped forward, close enough that he couldn't shut the door without hitting her. "I'm here for the librarian position." His eyebrows rose a fraction. "The what?" "The position. In the library. I saw the posting in—" "There is no posting." Seren's stomach dropped, but she didn't let it show. She squared her shoulders and met his gaze head on. "Then someone made a mistake. But I'm here now, and I'm qualified, and I'm not leaving until I've had a chance to prove it." The man stared at her like she'd just sprouted a second head. Behind him, firelight flickered in the grand hall, warm and dry and impossibly far away. "You're soaked through," he said after a long pause. "And you're bleeding." Seren glanced down at her knuckles. The skin was split where she'd hammered on the door, blood mixing with rainwater and dripping onto the stone steps. She wiped her hand on her skirt. "I'll live." "That remains to be seen." He stepped aside. "Inside. Before you catch pneumonia and die on my doorstep." She didn't wait for him to change his mind. She stepped over the threshold and into the warmth, her breath fogging in the sudden shift of temperature. The hall was enormous. Vaulted ceiling, marble floors, a chandelier that probably cost more than her stepfather's entire estate. Everything gleamed with a kind of cold, untouched perfection. The man shut the door and turned to face her, arms crossed. "You have 5 minutes to explain yourself. Then you leave." "I'm Seren Vale," she said, setting her bag down. Water pooled around her feet, dark and spreading. "I've spent the last 6 years managing a private collection of rare manuscripts and first editions. I read Latin, French, and enough Greek to get by. I can catalog, restore, and appraise. I don't steal, I don't gossip, and I don't ask questions I don't need answers to. None of which, the man said, changes the fact that there is no position. Then make one. His jaw tightened. You're very bold for someone who just lied her way onto my property. I didn't lie. I said I saw the posting. I didn't say you made it. Seren met his gaze and held it. And I didn't come all this way to beg. I came to work. If you don't need a librarian, fine. I'll scrub floors. I'll mend linens. I'll do whatever needs doing. But I'm not leaving tonight. Not in this storm. Not with nowhere else to go. The silence stretched thin between them. Somewhere deeper in the house, a clock chimed the hour. The man studied her with the kind of intensity that made her skin prickle, like he was peeling back layers and looking for rot underneath. Finally, he sighed. One night, you can sleep in the servants' quarters. In the morning, you leave. In the morning, Seren said, I'll show you what I can do, and then you'll decide. His eyes narrowed. You're not in a position to negotiate. Neither are you. She nodded toward the darkened hallway that stretched off to the left. I saw the state of your library on the way up the drive. The window's half open, and there's water damage on the sill. If you've got rare books in there, they're rotting as we speak. You need help whether you want to admit it or not. For a moment, she thought he might throw her out anyway. His hand twitched toward the door, and she braced herself to run. But then he exhaled sharply and turned away. Follow me, he said, and don't touch anything. Right? The servant who showed her to her room was a woman named Marta, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, with the kind of face that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. She didn't ask questions, just handed Seren a towel, a plain gray dress that was 2 sizes too big, and a blanket that smelled faintly of lavender. Breakfast is at 6, Marta said. Don't be late, and don't wander. Who was that man? Seren asked. The one who let me in. Marta paused in the doorway. That was the Duke, Adrian Thorne, and if you're smart, you'll keep your head down and your mouth shut around him. Why? Because he doesn't trust anyone, and the last person who crossed him ended up in a courtroom. Marta's expression softened, just slightly. Get some sleep, girl. You look half dead. She left, pulling the door shut behind her. Seren stood alone in the small, sparse room, just a bed, a chair, and a cracked mirror on the wall. She peeled off her wet clothes and wrapped herself in the blanket, shivering as the cold finally caught up with her. Her stepfather would be looking for her by now. He'd sent men before, when she'd tried to run the first time. They'd dragged her back and locked her in her room for a week. This time, she'd made sure to cover her tracks. She'd burned the letters, bribed the stable boy, and left in the middle of the night when everyone was asleep. But he was persistent, and he had money. Sooner or later, he'd find her, unless she made herself invisible. Seren lay down on the bed and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she'd prove herself indispensable. She'd make the Duke see her as an asset, not a liability. She'd bury herself so deep in this place that even if her stepfather came knocking, there'd be no reason to hand her over. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the only one she had. She woke to the sound of shouting. Seren bolted upright, heart pounding. The room was still dark, the faint gray of pre-dawn seeping through the single narrow window. She threw off the blanket and pressed her ear to the door. Don't care what you think, Marta. She's a stranger. She could be anyone. She's a girl who showed up in a storm with nothing. What's she gonna do? Steal the silverware? She could be a spy. Or worse. You're paranoid. I'm careful. Seren bit her lip. The Duke's voice was low and controlled, but there was an edge to it that made her skin crawl. She'd heard that tone before. Her stepfather used it right before he did something cruel. She pulled on the gray dress and stepped into the hallway. The voices were coming from the kitchen. She moved quietly, barefoot on cold stone, until she reached the doorway. The Duke stood with his back to her, arms braced on the table. Marta faced him, hands on her hips, utterly unbothered by the fact that she was arguing with a man who could fire her on the spot. She stays until the storm breaks, Marta said firmly. After that, it's your decision. It was always my decision, the Duke said. Then stop acting like she's a threat and start acting like a human being. He turned and his eyes landed on Seren. She froze. Eavesdropping, he said flatly. Wonderful. I wasn't... She stopped. No point in lying. I heard my name. Your name, he said, is the least interesting thing about you. Seren stepped into the room. Then ask me something more interesting. Why are you here? I told you last night. You told me a story. I want the truth. Marta muttered something under her breath and walked out, leaving them alone. The Duke didn't move. He just watched her, waiting. Seren took a breath. I'm running from someone. Someone who wants to control me. I don't have family, I don't have money, and I don't have anywhere else to go. So I came here. Because I heard you don't ask questions. I'm asking now. Then I'll answer. She held his gaze. My stepfather tried to sell me to a man twice my age. I refused, so I left. If he finds me, he'll drag me back and finish what he started. That's the truth. Do with it what you want. The Duke's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He straightened and crossed his arms. And the library? I wasn't lying about that either. I know books. I know how to take care of them. And if you let me prove it, I'll make myself useful enough that you won't want to throw me out. Confidence, he said, is not the same as competence. Then let me show you the difference. He studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded toward the door. The library's on the second floor, east wing. You have until noon. The library was a disaster. Seren stood in the doorway and stared. Books were piled everywhere, on tables, on chairs, stacked against the walls in precarious towers that looked ready to collapse. The shelves were half empty, labels peeling and faded. Dust coated every surface, thick enough to write in. And in the far corner, near the window the Duke had mentioned, water had seeped in and warped an entire shelf of what looked like first editions. She rolled up her sleeves. By the time the clock struck noon, she'd cleared 3 tables, sorted 200 volumes by subject and condition, and moved the water-damaged books to a dry area where she could assess the extent of the harm. Her hands were filthy. Her dress was streaked with dust and her back ached from lifting. But the library looked like someone gave a damn about it. The Duke appeared in the doorway exactly at noon, as if he'd been waiting. He walked in slowly, gaze sweeping the room. His expression gave nothing away. Seren stood by the window, arms crossed, and waited. You've been busy, he said finally. I've been working. He stopped beside one of the sorted stacks and picked up a book. It was a medical text, leather-bound, the edges of the pages gilded. He turned it over in his hands, then set it down carefully. You didn't just move them, he said. You organized them. That's what cataloging means. Most people would have made it look tidy and called it a day. I'm not most people. He looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she saw something other than suspicion in his face. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was close enough. You can stay, he said. For now. Room and board in exchange for restoring the library. If you do good work, we'll discuss wages. If you cause problems, you're gone. Understood? Seren nodded, her chest tight with relief. Understood. One more thing. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I don't care who you're running from, but if they come here, you deal with it. I won't have trouble brought to my door. You won't, she said. I promise. He held her gaze a moment longer, then turned and walked out. Seren let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. She looked around the library, at the work still left to do, at the books waiting to be saved, at the small, fragile space she'd just carved out for herself in a world that wanted to swallow her whole. She'd bought herself time. Now she just had to make sure it was enough. Oh, the first week passed in a blur of dust and paper and endless cataloging. Seren worked from dawn until her hands cramped and her eyes burned. She barely saw the Duke. He moved through the house like a shadow, always there, always watching, but never close enough to speak to unless he wanted something, which he didn't, mostly. On the 8th day, she found a first edition of De Revolutionibus buried under a stack of outdated atlases. The binding was cracked and the pages were brittle, but the text was intact. She nearly cried. She brought it to the Duke that evening, interrupting him in his study. This was in the library, she said, holding it out. Do you know what this is? He glanced up from the stack of letters on his desk. A book. It's Copernicus, first edition, 1543. Do you have any idea how rare this is? I'm aware. Then why the hell was it buried under a pile of junk? He leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised. Are you lecturing me in my own house? Seren set the book down on his desk, carefully. Someone needs to. This is worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. It should be in a vault, not gathering dust. Then put it in the vault. You have a vault? Of course I have a vault. She stared at him. And you didn't think to mention that when you hired me to restore the library? You didn't ask. She stopped, exhaled sharply, and shook her head. Where is it? Behind the fireplace in the west study. There's a lever. Don't break anything. Seren picked up the book and turned to leave. Then she paused. Why do you have all these books if you don't care about them? The Duke's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. They were my father's. And you kept them. I keep everything, he said quietly, whether I want to or not. She didn't know what to say to that, so she left. The servants talked. Seren learned quickly that if you kept your head down and your ears open, you could learn more in the kitchen than you ever could by asking questions. Marta was a fountain of information, though she pretended not to be. The Duke's a hard man, she said one evening, kneading dough with practiced efficiency. Lost his wife 5 years back. Hasn't been the same since. What happened? Seren asked. Fever. Came on fast, took her in 3 days. He was away on business, didn't even get to say goodbye. Marta shook her head. After that, he shut everyone out. Stopped trusting people. Stopped letting anyone close. That's why he's so suspicious. That's why he's still alive, Marta corrected. There's people who'd like to see him fall. Rivals, creditors, old enemies. He's made a lot of them over the years. And he thinks I'm one of them. He thinks everyone is. Marta glanced at her. But you're still here. That means something. It means he needs a librarian. It means, Marta said, he's decided you're not a threat. Yet. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Seren was in the library repairing the spine of a damaged manuscript when Marta appeared in the doorway with an envelope in her hand. This came for you, she said. Seren's stomach dropped. For me? Addressed to Miss Vale, care of Thornwood Estate. Marta held it out. You want to tell me why someone's writing to you here? Seren took the envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, precise, the letter sharp enough to cut. Her stepfather's hand. It's nothing, she lied. Doesn't look like nothing. It's handled. Marta frowned, but she didn't push. If you need help, I don't. The older woman studied her for a moment, then nodded and left. Seren waited until she was alone, then tore open the envelope. The letter inside was short. You have something that belongs to me. Return it, or I'll come and take it back myself. No signature. He didn't need one. Seren crumpled the letter in her fist. Her hands were shaking. She'd known this was coming. She'd known he wouldn't let her go without a fight. But seeing the words on paper made it real in a way it hadn't been before. He knew where she was. She burned the letter in the fireplace and watched the paper curl and blacken. Then she went back to work. The Duke found her that night, still in the library, surrounded by half-finished repairs and notes scrawled on scraps of paper. You're working late, he said from the doorway. Seren didn't look up. There's a lot to do. There's always a lot to do. He walked over and picked up one of the manuscripts she'd been working on. You've been avoiding me. I've been working. You've been hiding. She finally looked at him. What do you want? The truth. He set the manuscript down and crossed his arms. Someone wrote to you. Marta told me. Who was it? It doesn't concern you. If it's happening in my house, it concerns me. Seren stood, her chair scraping against the floor. I told you when I got here, I'm running from someone. He found me. That's all. And I'll deal with it. How? That's my problem. The Duke's jaw tightened. You're making it mine by being here. Then throw me out. The words hung between them, sharp and dangerous. Seren's heart pounded. She'd pushed too far. She knew it, but she was so damn tired of running, of hiding, of being afraid. The Duke stared at her. Then, slowly, he shook his head. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. You're not exactly easygoing yourself. I'm realistic. You're paranoid. I'm careful, he snapped. There's a difference. Is there? Seren stepped closer. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're so busy protecting yourself that you've forgotten what it's like to actually live. His eyes went cold. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. She held his gaze. I know you keep your father's books, even though they remind you of everything you lost. I know you push people away because it's easier than risking them leaving, and I know you let me stay because some part of you wants to believe that not everyone is out to hurt you. The silence was deafening. Then the Duke turned and walked out. Seren sank into her chair, hands trembling. She'd crossed a line. She knew it. And tomorrow she'd probably pay for it. But tonight, she told the truth. And that was worth something. The next morning, she found a note on her door. Library, 8 o'clock. She arrived 5 minutes early. The Duke was already there, standing by the window with his hands clasped behind his back. You're right, he said without turning around. I am paranoid. And careful. And I do push people away. He turned to face her. But I have good reasons. I'm sure you do. My wife didn't die of fever. His voice was flat, emotionless. She was poisoned by someone I trusted, someone who worked in this house, and I didn't see it coming until it was too late. Seren's breath caught. I'm sorry. Don't be. Just understand why I don't take chances. He paused. But you're still here, and you've done good work, so I'm going to make you an offer. What kind of offer? Stay. Finish restoring the library, and if your stepfather comes looking for you, I'll deal with him. Why would you do that? Because, the Duke said, you stood up to me. No one does that, and I respect it. He held out his hand. Do we have a deal? Seren looked at his hand, then at his face. There was no warmth there, no softness. But there was something else, something that looked almost like trust. She took his hand. We have a deal. His grip was firm, steady. Good. Now get back to work. She smiled despite herself. Yes, Your Grace. And Seren? He released her hand. If you ever call me paranoid again, I'm docking your pay. I don't have any pay. Then I'll start docking it retroactively. She laughed. Actually laughed. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Thornwood, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd found a place where she could stop running, at least for a while. The second letter arrived 3 weeks later, and this time it wasn't addressed to her. Seren was shelving a collection of botanical texts when Marta burst into the library, face flushed and eyes wide. The Duke wants to see you, now. What's wrong? Just go. Seren set down the book and hurried after her, pulse quickening. She'd learned to read Marta's moods over the past month. The woman was unflappable under normal circumstances. Whatever this was, it wasn't normal. The Duke was in his study, standing behind his desk with a letter in his hand. His expression was carved from ice. Close the door, he said. Seren did. What happened? He held up the letter. This came this morning from a man claiming to be your stepfather. He says you stole from him money, jewelry, family heirlooms. He's demanding I return you to him immediately, or he'll involve the authorities. Her stomach turned to lead. He's lying. Is he? Yes. She stepped forward. I didn't take anything from him. I left with the clothes on my back and nothing else. Then why would he make that claim? Because he's trying to control me. If he can't force me back, he'll ruin me instead. Make it so no one will hire me, no one will trust me. That's how he works. The Duke set the letter down, his jaw tight. He also says you forged the reference you showed me when you arrived. Seren's breath caught. She'd forgotten about that. Did you? There was no point in lying, not now. Yes. So you lied to me. I did what I had to do to survive. By lying. By making a choice, she shot back. I could have stayed and let him sell me off like livestock, or I could have run and taken my chances. I chose to run, and if that makes me a liar in your eyes, fine, but I won't apologize for it. The Duke stared at her, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched thin and dangerous between them. Finally, he exhaled. You should have told me. Would you have let me stay if I had? I don't know. Exactly. Seren crossed her arms. You don't trust anyone. You said so yourself. If I'd walked in here and admitted I was running from a man who wanted to destroy me, you would have thrown me out before I finished the sentence. Maybe. He picked up the letter again, scanning it. He says he's coming here, in 2 days. Her blood went cold. What? He wants to retrieve his property in person, his words, not mine. You can't let him take me. I don't intend to. The Duke's eyes met hers. But I need to know everything. No more lies, no more half-truths. If I'm going to stand between you and him, I need the full story. Seren sank into the chair across from his desk, her hands trembling. She'd known this moment would come eventually. She just hadn't expected it to come so soon. My mother died when I was 12, she began. My father remarried a year later. His new wife had a son from a previous marriage, my stepbrother. When my father died 2 years after that, everything went to her. The house, the money, all of it. She remarried again within 6 months. That's when things got bad. How bad? Her new husband, my stepfather, saw me as an inconvenience. I was old enough to work, so he put me to work managing his library. He had a collection of rare books, manuscripts, things he'd inherited or bought over the years. I spent 6 years cataloging them, restoring them, keeping them in order. I thought if I made myself useful, he'd leave me alone. But he didn't. No. Seren's voice cracked. 6 months ago, he told me he'd found a buyer. Not for the books, for me. A business associate of his, a man in his 50s who wanted a young wife. The deal was already done. I was supposed to marry him within the month. The Duke's expression darkened. And you refused. I begged him not to do it. I told him I'd work harder. I'd do anything he wanted. But he didn't care. He said I was a burden, and this was the only way to get rid of me and make a profit at the same time. She looked down at her hands. So I left. I waited until everyone was asleep, packed a bag, and walked out. I've been running ever since. And the forged reference? I wrote it myself, used his stationery, copied his handwriting as best I could. I knew no one would hire me without some kind of credential, so I made one. She met his gaze. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. I did what I had to do. The Duke leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, he'll bring men with him, probably a solicitor, maybe even a constable, if he's managed to convince them you're a thief. I know. And if he has any kind of proof, forged or otherwise, it'll be hard to fight him. I know that too. So what do you want me to do? Seren blinked. You're asking me? It's your life. You should have a say in how we handle this. She hadn't expected that. No one had ever asked her what she wanted before. They told her, ordered her, decided for her, but never asked. I want to stand my ground, she said quietly. I want to tell him no, to his face, in front of witnesses. I want him to know that I'm not his property, and I never was. The Duke nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. You'll back me up? I gave you my word. He stood. But we're going to do this my way. When he arrives, you let me handle the talking. You stay calm, you don't lose your temper, and you don't give him anything he can use against you. Understood? Understood. Good. He walked around the desk and stopped in front of her. And Seren, if he tries to take you by force, he'll have to go through me first. She looked up at him, her throat tight. Why are you doing this? Because I know what it's like to lose someone to a man who thought he had the right to take what he wanted. His voice was low, controlled. I won't let it happen again. Not in my house, Dad. The next 2 days passed in a haze of preparation. The Duke sent for his solicitor, a sharp-eyed man named Grenville, who arrived with a leather case full of documents and a skeptical expression. Seren answered his questions as honestly as she could, her hands clenched in her lap. The forged reference complicates things, Grenville said, flipping through his notes. If they choose to press charges, it could go badly for you. They won't, the Duke said. He's not here to file charges. He's here to intimidate her into coming back. You sound very certain. I am. Grenville looked between them, then sighed. Very well. But if this goes sideways, don't say I didn't warn you. Marta, meanwhile, took it upon herself to prepare Seren for the confrontation. "You need to look the part," she said, pulling a dark green dress from the wardrobe. "Not a servant, not a charity case. Someone who belongs here." "I don't belong here." "You do now." Marta held up the dress. "Put this on, and for the love of all that's holy, stand up straight. You're not a victim anymore. Act like it." Seren wanted to argue, but Marta was right. If she was going to face her stepfather, she needed to look like someone who couldn't be pushed around. Someone who'd made a life for herself and wasn't going to give it up without a fight. The dress fit perfectly. Marta pinned her hair back, tucking the loose strands behind her ears, and stepped back to admire her work. "There," she said. "Now you look like someone worth defending." "I always was." "I know, but now other people will see it too." He arrived exactly on time because of course he did. Punctuality was one of his many weapons, always in control, always one step ahead. Seren watched from the library window as the carriage pulled up to the front entrance. 3 men stepped out. Her stepfather was in the middle, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hard and weathered. To his left was a younger man in a clerk's uniform, the solicitor, she assumed. To his right was a constable, his uniform crisp and official. Her hands tightened on the windowsill. "He brought a constable," she said. The Duke appeared beside her, his expression calm. "Of course he did. It's a power play. He wants you to feel cornered. It's working. Then don't let it show." He placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and steady. "Remember what we talked about. Stay calm. Let me do the talking." She nodded, even though her pulse was hammering in her ears. They met in the drawing room. The Duke had arranged the space carefully. 2 chairs facing the door, a table between them, with tea already poured. Grenville stood off to the side, his expression neutral. Marta lingered near the doorway, arms crossed. The 3 men entered, and Seren's stepfather's gaze locked onto her immediately. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "There you are," he said. "I was beginning to think you'd run off again." "I'm not running," Seren said. Her voice didn't shake. "Small victory." "No, you're hiding behind this man's wealth and title." He turned to the Duke. "Your Grace, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. I'm sure you're a busy man." "I am," the Duke said. "Which is why I'd like to get straight to the point. You claim Miss Vale stole from you. I'd like to see the evidence." The stepfather's smile widened. "Of course." He nodded to the solicitor, who pulled a sheaf of papers from his case and laid them on the table. "These documents detail the items Miss Vale took from my home when she fled," the solicitor said. "A silver locket belonging to her late mother, valued at £50, a set of pearl earrings, valued at £30, and a sum of cash totaling £100, taken from my client's personal safe." Seren stared at the list, her stomach churning. "That's a lie. I didn't take any of that." "You're saying these records are false?" the solicitor asked. "I'm saying he made them up." "Do you have proof?" "Do you?" The solicitor's expression didn't change. "We have witness statements, servants who saw you in possession of these items prior to your departure." "Then bring them here. Let me face them." "That won't be necessary," the stepfather said smoothly. "I'm not here to press charges, Your Grace. I'm here to retrieve what's mine and take my stepdaughter home where she belongs." "She's not a possession," the Duke said, "and she's not going anywhere." The stepfather's smile faded. "With all due respect, Your Grace, this is a family matter. It doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when it happens under my roof." "Then perhaps you should ask yourself why a young woman with no references, no background, and no connections showed up at your door in the middle of the night." The stepfather leaned forward. "Has she told you about the forged letter? The one she used to gain entry to your household?" The Duke didn't flinch. "She has." "And you're still defending her?" "I am." "Why?" "Because unlike you," the Duke said quietly, "I believe people deserve a second chance." The stepfather's jaw tightened. "This is absurd. Constable, I'm formally requesting you escort Miss Vale back to my custody. She's a minor." "I'm 22, Seren interrupted. "I haven't been a minor for 4 years." "Then she's a thief, and you're harboring her." "Actually," Grenville said, stepping forward, "she's an employee. Miss Vale is currently employed by His Grace as a librarian, a position for which she is well qualified despite the unfortunate circumstances of her initial arrival. As such, she is under his protection and has every right to refuse your custody. The stepfather's face darkened. This is ridiculous. You're protecting a criminal. I'm protecting a woman who's done nothing wrong, the Duke said. And if you continue to make baseless accusations, I'll have my solicitor file a suit for defamation. You wouldn't dare. Try me. The room went silent. The constable shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the two men. The solicitor adjusted his glasses. Then the stepfather turned to Seren. Is this really what you want? To hide behind a stranger and throw away your family? You're not my family, Seren said. Her voice was steady now, clear. You never were. You used me, controlled me, and tried to sell me off when I was no longer useful. I owe you nothing. You owe me everything. I gave you a roof over your head, food on your table. You gave me a prison. She stood, her hands clenched at her sides. And I'm done pretending to be grateful for it. The stepfather's face twisted with rage. He took a step toward her, and the Duke moved immediately, placing himself between them. You need to leave, the Duke said, his voice cold and final. Now. This isn't over. Yes, it is. For a moment, Seren thought her stepfather might lunge at him. His hands were shaking, his face flushed red. But then he straightened, smoothed his coat, and turned to the constable. You're a witness to this. His Grace is harboring a known thief. I expect you to include that in your report. The constable cleared his throat. Sir, with all due respect, I haven't seen any evidence of theft, and Miss Vale appears to be here of her own free will. She's been coerced. She's been nothing of the sort, Marta said from the doorway. I've been here the whole time. No one's forced her to do anything. The stepfather glared at her, then at the Duke, then finally at Seren. You'll regret this, he said quietly. All of you. I doubt it, the Duke said. Goodbye. The three men left, the door slamming behind them. Seren stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. It's over, the Duke said. He's gone. No, he's not. Seren turned to face him, her hands still shaking. He meant what he said. He'll come back. He'll find a way to ruin me, to make sure no one ever trusts me again. Then we'll deal with it when it happens. You don't understand. He doesn't give up. He'll spread lies, pay people off, do whatever it takes. Seren. The Duke grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. You're not alone anymore. You have allies now. You have me. And I promise you, I will not let him destroy you. She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so badly it hurt. But she'd learned the hard way that promises didn't mean much when the person making them had nothing to lose. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Because you remind me of someone I couldn't save, he said, and I'll be damned if I let history repeat itself. 3 days later, the rumors started. It began with whispers in the market, servants from neighboring estates gossiping about the Duke's new librarian, the one who'd shown up out of nowhere and wormed her way into his good graces. Then it spread to the local taverns, the shops, the church steps. By the end of the week, half the county was talking about the thief who'd seduced a duke to escape justice. Seren heard it all through Marta, who came back from town with a basket of groceries and a face like thunder. They're saying terrible things, Marta said, slamming the basket on the kitchen table. That you're a con artist, that you're using his grace for money and protection. One woman even said you were probably sleeping with him. Seren's stomach turned. Of course they are. It's that bastard stepfather of yours. He's been spreading stories, paying people to talk. He wants to destroy your reputation so thoroughly that even the Duke can't protect you. Then he's winning. Not if we fight back. How? Seren asked. It's my word against his. And he has money, connections, witnesses who'll say whatever he tells them to say. What do I have? You have the truth. The truth doesn't matter if no one believes it. Marta grabbed her by the shoulders, her grip firm. Listen to me, girl. I've lived long enough to know that people believe what they want to believe, but they also respect strength. If you cower now, if you hide, you're proving them right. But if you stand tall and keep doing your work, if you show them you're not afraid, that's how you win. I am afraid. Then be afraid. But don't let them see it. Quote. The Duke called a meeting that evening. Seren, Marta, and Grenville gathered in his study, the air thick with tension. The rumors are spreading faster than we anticipated, Grenville said. If we don't act soon, they'll do permanent damage to both Miss Vale's reputation and your own, Your Grace. What do you suggest? The Duke asked. A public statement, something formal from you, confirming Miss Vale's employment and vouching for her character. That'll just make it look like he's covering for her, Marta said. Then what do you propose? We go on the offensive. The Duke stood, pacing to the window. If he wants to spread lies, we'll expose them for what they are. We'll gather evidence, interview witnesses, prove that his claims are baseless. That could take weeks, Grenville said. Maybe longer. Then we start now. Seren stood. I want to help. The Duke turned to her. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. It's my reputation on the line. I'm not going to sit back and let you clean up my mess. It's not a mess. It's a battle. And battles are dangerous. I don't care. She met his gaze. I'm done running. I'm done hiding. If he wants a fight, I'll give him one. The Duke studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, but you do exactly as I say. No going off on your own. No taking unnecessary risks. Understood? Understood. Good. He turned to Grenville. Start gathering statements from the servants here. Anyone who can vouch for Miss Vale's character and work ethic. I want names, dates, specifics. And what about the stepfather's witnesses? We'll deal with them when the time comes. But the time came sooner than any of them expected. 2 days later, Seren was in the library when a young woman appeared in the doorway. She was small, pale, with dark circles under her eyes, and hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Can I help you? Seren asked. The woman glanced over her shoulder, then stepped inside and closed the door. My name is Lily. I used to work for your stepfather. Seren's breath caught. Why are you here? Because I can't do this anymore. Lily's voice shook. He paid me to lie. To say I saw you steal those things. But I didn't. I never saw you take anything. And I can't keep lying, not when it's hurting someone who doesn't deserve it. You're willing to testify to that? If it'll help, yes. It could cost you everything. He'll come after you. I know. Lily's eyes filled with tears. But I've already lost everything that matters. My conscience is all I have left. Seren crossed the room and took the woman's hands. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. I think I do. Lily squeezed her hands. You're brave, braver than I ever was. Don't let him take that from you. Oh. When Seren told the Duke about Lily's confession, his expression shifted from surprise to something darker, more determined. This changes everything, he said. If we have a witness willing to recant, we can dismantle his entire case. He'll retaliate, Seren warned. Against her, against me, against you. Let him try. Grenville drew up the paperwork that night. Lily signed it the next morning, her hand shaking, but her signature clear. By the afternoon, the Duke had sent copies to every major household in the county, along with a formal statement condemning the stepfather's actions and demanding a public apology. The response was immediate. Her stepfather sent a letter so venomous it practically burned the page. He called the Duke a fool, Seren a whore, and Lily a traitor. He promised legal action, social ruin, and worse. The Duke burned the letter without reading it all the way through. He's scared, he said. That's why he's lashing out. Or he's planning something worse. Then we'll be ready. But 3 days later, when a fire broke out in the estate's east wing and nearly destroyed half the library, Seren realized they hadn't been ready at all. The flames were contained before they spread to the rest of the house, but the damage was devastating. Books she'd spent weeks restoring were reduced to ash. Shelves collapsed. The smell of smoke lingered for days. And carved into the doorframe, barely visible beneath the soot, was a message. You should have come home when you had the chance. Seren stood in the wreckage, her hands clenched so tight her nails drew blood. He did this, she said. He burned it all just to hurt me. The Duke stood beside her, his face carved from stone. Then we heard him back. How? By finishing what we started. He turned to face her. No more defense. No more waiting for him to make the next move. We take the fight to him. We expose every lie, every bribe, every dirty deal he's ever made. And we make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of man he is. Seren looked up at him, something fierce and desperate rising in her chest. You'd do that? Risk everything? I already have. His jaw tightened. And I'm not stopping now. She believed him. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could win. She believed him. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could win. But winning, she learned fast, required getting her hands dirty. The Duke wasted no time. By dawn the next morning, he'd sent riders to 3 neighboring counties with orders to dig into her stepfather's business dealings. Bank records, property transactions, court filings, anything that could expose the man's finances or reveal cracks in his carefully constructed reputation. Grenville worked through the night drafting subpoenas, and Marta quietly reached out to former servants who'd worked in her stepfather's household, offering them safety and coin in exchange for testimony. Seren wanted to help, but the Duke refused to let her leave the estate. You're too visible, he said when she argued. If he sees you out in public, he'll use it against you. Paint you as reckless, ungrateful, dangerous. We can't give him that ammunition. So I'm supposed to just sit here while everyone else fights my battle? You're supposed to stay alive long enough for us to win it. She hated that he was right. So she stayed. She worked in what remained of the library, salvaging what she could from the wreckage. Most of the rare manuscripts were gone, ash and memory now. But a few had survived, tucked away in drawers or shelved in corners the fire hadn't reached. She cataloged them with shaking hands, her mind half on the work and half on the men riding out across the county, searching for ammunition to use against a man who'd already proven he was willing to burn her world down. 3 days passed. Then 4. The house felt like a held breath, everyone waiting for something to break. On the 5th day, Grenville returned with a ledger. Seren was in the drawing room when he arrived, mending the torn edge of a manuscript page. She heard his boots in the hallway and set her work aside, pulse quickening. The Duke met him at the door, and the 2 men disappeared into the study without a word. She waited 10 minutes, then 20. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore and knocked. Come in, the Duke called. She pushed the door open. Grenville sat at the desk, the ledger spread out in front of him, his face drawn and pale. The Duke stood by the window, arms crossed, his expression grim. What did you find? Seren asked. Grenville glanced at the Duke, who nodded. Your stepfather's been running an illegal lending operation for the past 3 years. He loans money to desperate families at exorbitant interest rates, then seizes their property when they can't pay. He's ruined at least a dozen estates this way, maybe more. Seren's stomach twisted. How did you find this? One of his former clerks came forward. A man named Winters. He kept copies of the contracts against your stepfather's orders because he knew what was happening was wrong. He's willing to testify. Will it be enough? It's a start, the Duke said, but we need more. We need proof that connects him to the fire, to the harassment, to the lies he's been spreading about you. Right now we can prove he's a criminal, but not that he's your criminal. Then we find the connection, Seren said. How? She thought for a moment, her mind racing. Then it clicked. The man he tried to sell me to, the business associate. If we can find him, he might talk. He'd know about the arrangement, about my stepfather's methods. He might even have documents. Grenville frowned. Do you know his name? Caldwell. Edmund Caldwell. He owns a shipping company in the southern port towns. The Duke's eyes sharpened. Caldwell. I know that name. He's been trying to buy shipping routes from me for years. I always refused. Something about him felt off. Now we know why, Grenville said. If he's doing business with a loan shark, he's probably not much better himself. Can you find him? Seren asked. I can try, Grenville said, but it'll take time. And if he's as dirty as your stepfather, he won't talk willingly. Then we make him willing, the Duke said. His voice was cold, final. Offer him immunity. Tell him we'll look the other way on whatever dealings he's had with your stepfather if he gives us what we need. That's bribery. That's strategy. Grenville sighed, but he nodded. I'll draft the offer, but if this goes wrong, It won't, the Duke said. It can't. Caldwell agreed to meet within 2 days. The Duke insisted on going alone, but Seren refused to be left behind. This is my fight, she said. I'm coming with you. It's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous. I'm still coming. He stared at her, jaw tight, then finally exhaled. Fine, but you stay in the carriage until I say otherwise, and if anything goes wrong, you run. Understood? Understood. They left at dawn, the carriage rattling down muddy roads toward the port town of Harwick. The sky was overcast, the air thick with the smell of salt and rain. Seren sat across from the Duke, her hands clenched in her lap, trying not to think about all the ways this could fall apart. You're nervous, the Duke said. Of course I'm nervous. Good. Nervous means you're thinking clearly. He leaned forward slightly. When we get there, let me do the talking. Caldwell's the type who'll try to manipulate you if he thinks he can. Don't give him the satisfaction. What if he refuses to help? Then we find another way. And if there isn't one? The Duke's expression didn't change. There's always another way. Caldwell's office was in a warehouse near the docks, a sprawling building that reeked of fish and tar. The Duke left Seren in the carriage with the driver, a silent, broad-shouldered man who looked like he could break someone in half without breaking a sweat. Stay here, the Duke said. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, leave. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. That's an order. He walked into the warehouse before she could argue. Seren sat in the carriage, counting the minutes. 5 passed, then 10. She watched the dock workers hauling crates and barrels, listened to the gulls screaming overhead, and tried not to imagine what was happening inside. At 15 minutes, the side door of the warehouse opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, well-dressed, with graying hair and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He glanced around, then walked quickly toward the main road and disappeared into the crowd. Seren's pulse quickened. Something was wrong. She opened the carriage door. I'm going in. The driver grabbed her arm. His Grace said, I don't care what he said. She yanked free and ran toward the warehouse. The side door was still ajar. She slipped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. The interior was cavernous, filled with stacks of crates and coils of rope. Voices echoed from somewhere deeper inside. Low, tense, angry. She moved toward them, her footsteps silent on the wooden floor. Then she heard the Duke's voice, sharp and cold. You're lying. I'm not, another man said. Caldwell, she assumed. I don't know anything about a fire. Your stepfather never mentioned it. He never mentioned it, or you didn't ask. I don't ask questions I don't want answers to. Then you're a coward as well as a criminal. There was a thud like something heavy hitting the floor. Seren froze. I don't owe you anything, Caldwell said, his voice rising. You come in here, make demands, threaten me with immunity I don't even need. You need it more than you think. I think you're bluffing. Try me. Seren moved closer, peering around a stack of crates. The Duke stood in the center of a cleared space, hands at his sides, his posture deceptively relaxed. Caldwell faced him, flanked by 2 men who looked like hired muscle. One of them had a club. This meeting is over, Caldwell said. Get out. Not until you give me what I came for. Then I guess you'll be here a while. The man with the club stepped forward. Seren's breath caught. She looked around, desperate for something, anything she could use. Her eyes landed on an iron pipe leaning against the wall. She grabbed it and stepped out into the open. Stop! Every head turned toward her. The Duke's expression went from calm to furious in half a second. I told you to stay in the carriage, he said through gritted teeth. And I told you I wasn't leaving you. She raised the pipe, her hands steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. Back off, all of you. Caldwell laughed. You brought a woman to do your negotiating? That's pathetic. She's not here to negotiate, the Duke said. She's here to remind you what's at stake. And what's that? Your reputation, Seren said. She stepped forward, the pipe still raised. I know what you tried to do. You were going to buy me from my stepfather like I was livestock. You didn't care that I didn't want it, that it was wrong. You just wanted what you wanted, and you were willing to pay for it. Caldwell's smile faded. You can't prove that. I can prove enough. She lowered the pipe slightly. I have names, dates, letters my stepfather kept. And if you don't help us bring him down, I'll make sure every one of those letters ends up in the hands of the magistrate. You'll be ruined right alongside him. You're bluffing. Maybe. But are you willing to risk it? The silence stretched thin. The two hired men glanced at each other, uncertain. Caldwell's jaw worked, his eyes flicking between Seren and the Duke. Finally, he exhaled. Fine. What do you want to know? They left the warehouse an hour later with signed testimony and copies of contracts that linked Caldwell to her stepfather's illegal dealings. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to start building a case that would destroy the man who'd tried to destroy her. Seren climbed into the carriage, her legs shaking so badly she nearly fell. The Duke followed, slamming the door shut. That was reckless, he said. That was necessary. You could have been hurt. So could you. He stared at her, his anger warring with something else, something that looked almost like admiration. Then he shook his head. Don't ever do that again. I can't promise that. Seren, I'm not a damsel, she interrupted. I'm not someone who needs saving. I'm someone who's fighting for her life, and I'll do whatever it takes to survive. If you can't accept that, then maybe I shouldn't be here. The Duke's expression softened. You're right. I'm sorry. She blinked. What? I said you're right. I've been treating you like you're fragile, but you're not. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. He leaned back against the seat. I won't underestimate you again. Good, she said, but her voice came out softer than she intended. The documents from Caldwell turned out to be everything Grenville needed. Within a week, he'd filed formal charges against her stepfather with the magistrate. Fraud, extortion, intimidation, arson. The case was airtight, backed by testimony from Lily, Winters, and now Caldwell himself. But her stepfather didn't go quietly. The day before the hearing, he arrived at Thornwood Estate in person. No constable this time. No solicitor. Just him in a hired carriage, his face a mask of cold fury. Marta came running to the library, breathless. He's here, at the front door, demanding to see you. Seren's blood went cold. Where's the Duke? In town with Grenville. They won't be back for another hour. Then I'll handle it. You can't. I can. Seren stood, her heart pounding. I have to. She walked to the front door, Marta trailing behind her. Her stepfather stood on the steps, rain dripping from his coat. He looked older than she remembered, his face lined and haggard, but his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, cruel. Seren, he said, we need to talk. We have nothing to talk about. I think we do. He stepped forward. You've made your point. You've embarrassed me, cost me money, turned people against me. But you've won. So let's end this. Drop the charges, come home, and we'll pretend none of this ever happened. You're insane. I'm offering you a way out, he said. Take it. Before this gets worse. Worse for who? For everyone. His voice dropped. I know things, Seren. Things about the Duke, about his late wife, about the people he's crossed, about debts he owes. If you push me, I'll use them. I'll destroy him the way you're trying to destroy me. Seren's hands clenched. You're lying. Am I? He smiled. Test me. See what happens. She doesn't have to. The Duke's voice cut through the rain like a blade. Seren spun around. He stood in the doorway, Grenville beside him, both of them soaked and furious. You're trespassing, the Duke said. Leave. Now. Not until I get what I came for. You're not getting anything. Her stepfather's smile widened. Then I'll take it. He lunged toward Seren. She stumbled back, but he was faster, his hand closing around her wrist. She screamed, twisting, and brought her knee up hard into his stomach. He grunted and released her, and the Duke was there, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the doorframe. You're done, the Duke said, his voice deadly calm. Tomorrow, you'll stand in front of the magistrate and answer for everything you've done. And when you're convicted, you'll lose everything. Your money, your reputation, your freedom. You'll spend the rest of your life knowing you were beaten by the girl you tried to sell." Her stepfather's face twisted with rage. "You think you've won? You think this is over? I'll burn you both to the ground before I let that happen." "Try," the Duke said. "See how far you get." He released him, and her stepfather staggered back, breathing hard. For a moment, Seren thought he might attack again. But then he turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy on the gravel. Seren sagged against the doorframe, her whole body trembling. The Duke reached for her, steadying her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No, I'm fine." "You're not fine." "I will be." She looked up at him, her eyes burning. "Tomorrow, when we end this." The hearing was set for noon in the county courthouse. Seren wore the green dress Marta had given her hair pinned back, her hands steady. The Duke walked beside her, Grenville on her other side, and behind them came Lily, Winters, and half a dozen other witnesses who'd agreed to testify. The courthouse was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls, whispers rippling through the crowd as Seren walked down the aisle. She kept her head high, her gaze forward, refusing to let them see the fear coiled tight in her chest. Her stepfather sat at the defendant's table, flanked by two lawyers who looked expensive and nervous. He didn't look at her. Not once. The magistrate, a stern-faced man named Harrow, called the court to order. Grenville stood and presented the evidence: ledgers, contracts, testimony. One by one, the witnesses took the stand. Lily described the lies she'd been paid to tell. Winters detailed the illegal loans. Caldwell admitted to his role in the attempted marriage arrangement. Her stepfather's lawyers tried to discredit them, but Grenville was relentless. Every objection was overruled. Every attempt to twist the narrative was shut down. And then it was Seren's turn. She stood and walked to the witness stand, her legs shaking. The magistrate looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "Miss Vale," he said, "please state your name and your connection to the defendant." "My name is Seren Vale. He's my stepfather." "And you've accused him of harassment, intimidation, and attempted coercion. Is that correct?" "Yes." "Tell us what happened, in your own words." Seren took a breath. Then she told them everything. The years of control, the forced labor, the attempted sale, the threats, the lies, the fire. She didn't cry. She didn't falter. She just spoke, her voice clear and steady, and let the truth do the rest. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. The magistrate looked at her stepfather. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Her stepfather stood slowly. His face was pale, his hands clenched. "She's lying. All of them are lying. This is a conspiracy." "Enough!" The magistrate's voice was sharp. "I've heard enough." He glanced down at his notes, then back up. "Based on the evidence presented, I find the defendant guilty of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy to commit arson. Sentencing will take place in 2 weeks. Until then, he'll be held in custody." He banged his gavel. "This court is adjourned." The room erupted. People shouted, cheered, gasped. Seren stood frozen, her ears ringing. She'd won. Her stepfather was dragged out by 2 guards, his face twisted with rage. As he passed her, he stopped and leaned in close. "This isn't over," he hissed. "You'll pay for this. I swear it." "Get him out of here," the magistrate ordered. The guards yanked him away. Seren watched him go, her heart pounding, and realized she wasn't afraid anymore. She was free. But freedom, she learned that night, came with a price. They returned to Thornwood Estate just after sunset. Seren was exhausted, her body aching, her mind numb. The Duke walked her inside, his hand steady on her back. "Get some rest," he said. "You've earned it." "What about you?" "I have work to do." She wanted to argue, but she was too tired. She climbed the stairs to her room, peeled off the green dress, and collapsed onto the bed. She didn't hear the window break. She didn't hear the footsteps on the stairs. She only heard the voice, low, cold, familiar, when it was already too late. "Hello, Seren." She bolted upright. Her stepfather stood in the doorway, his clothes torn and dirty, his face bruised. He'd escaped. Somehow, he'd escaped. "You should have listened," he said, stepping into the room. "I gave you a chance. You threw it away. How did you— Does it matter?" He pulled something from his coat, A knife, small and sharp. You ruined me. Now I'm going to return the favor. Seren scrambled back, her heart hammering. Someone will hear. No one's coming. The Duke's in his study. The servants are asleep. It's just you and me. He lunged. Seren threw herself sideways, hitting the floor hard. She rolled, grabbed the leg of a chair, and swung it at him. It connected with his shoulder, and he stumbled, cursing. Help! She screamed. Someone! He was on her before she could finish, his hand clamping over her mouth. The knife pressed against her throat, cold and sharp. Quiet, he hissed, or I'll cut you open right here. Footsteps pounded in the hallway. The door slammed open. The Duke stood there, his face carved from fury, a pistol in his hand. Let her go, he said. Her stepfather laughed. Or what? You'll shoot me? Go ahead. But she'll be dead before I hit the floor. The Duke's eyes met Seren's. She saw the calculation there, the cold assessment. Then he lowered the gun. Fine, he said. Take me instead. What? You want revenge? Take it out on me. Let her go. Her stepfather's grip loosened slightly. You think I'm stupid? I think you're desperate. The Duke set the gun on the floor and kicked it away. And desperate men make mistakes. So here's your chance. Let her go, take me hostage, and walk out of here. Or keep that knife at her throat and watch what happens when I stop being reasonable. For a moment, no one moved. Then her stepfather shoved Seren away. She hit the wall, gasping, and he grabbed the Duke instead, the knife pressed against his throat. Smart choice, her stepfather said. Now we're leaving, and if anyone follows... Seren grabbed the pistol. She didn't think. She just moved. Her hands closed around the grip, her finger found the trigger, and she raised it, her arms shaking. Let him go, she said. Her stepfather froze. You won't shoot. Try me. He stared at her. Then he smiled. You don't have it in you. You're right, Seren said, and pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening. Her stepfather screamed, the knife clattering to the floor as he clutched his shoulder. Blood seeped through his fingers. The Duke wrenched free and slammed him to the ground, pinning him. Guards poured into the room, and within seconds, her stepfather was in chains, still screaming, still bleeding. Seren dropped the gun. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely stand. The Duke crossed to her, his eyes searching hers. Are you all right? She nodded, then shook her head, then started to cry. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she fell apart. It's over, he whispered. It's finally over. And this time, she believed him. She believed him. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could win. The Duke didn't waste time. By dawn the next morning, he'd summoned every contact he had, solicitors, investigators, even a retired magistrate who owed him a favor. They gathered in the drawing room like generals planning a siege, maps and documents spread across every surface. Seren stood at the edge of it all, watching them work. Part of her wanted to dive in, to take control, but another part, the part that had spent years surviving by staying small and quiet, wanted to disappear entirely. Miss Vale, Grenville waved her over. We need you to make a list. Everyone your stepfather did business with. Anyone who might have witnessed his dealings, legitimate or otherwise. She moved to the table, picking up a pen. Her hand shook slightly. That could take hours. Then we have hours, the Duke said from across the room. He was reading through a stack of financial records, his expression sharp and focused. Write down everything you remember. Names, dates, transactions. Anything that might give us leverage. Leverage, Seren repeated. You're going to blackmail him? I'm going to give him a choice. Retract his accusations and disappear, or have his entire life torn apart piece by piece. The Duke looked up, his eyes hard. Which would you prefer? She should have been shocked, should have argued that stooping to his level made them no better than him. But she wasn't, and it didn't. Because the truth was, she wanted him to suffer. Wanted him to feel the same fear and helplessness he'd inflicted on her for years. I prefer whatever gets him out of my life permanently, she said. The Duke's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Good answer. She started writing. The names came slowly at first, dredged up from memories she'd tried to bury. Men her stepfather had entertained at dinner. business partners who'd visited the house, servants who'd been dismissed without explanation. The more she wrote, the clearer the picture became. A web of shady deals, underpaid workers, and corners cut so sharp they could draw blood. By mid-morning, she had 3 pages filled front and back. "This is enough to start," Grenville said, scanning the list. "I recognize some of these names. If even half of what you're suggesting is true, we'll have more than enough to bury him." "It's all true," Seren said. "I kept his books for 6 years. I saw everything." "Did you keep copies?" "No. I didn't think—" She stopped. "Wait. There was a ledger. He kept it in his study, locked in the bottom drawer of his desk. If it's still there, it'll have records of every questionable transaction he ever made." The Duke set down the documents he'd been reading. "Can you describe it?" "Leather-bound, about this big." She held up her hands. "Dark brown, with his initials stamped on the cover. He used to joke that it was his insurance policy, proof that if anyone came after him, he could take them down too." "Then we need to get our hands on it." "How? He's not going to just hand it over." "No," the Duke said, "but he might not notice if it goes missing." Seren stared at him. "You want to steal it?" "I want to retrieve evidence that rightfully belongs in the hands of the authorities." "That's semantics. That's strategy." He crossed his arms. "Do you know the layout of his house?" "Every inch of it." "Good. Then you're coming with me." "Absolutely not," Grenville said, standing. "Your Grace, with all due respect, this is reckless. If you're caught, we won't be caught. You don't know that. I know that sitting here waiting for him to make the next move is a losing strategy." The Duke's voice was calm, controlled, but there was steel underneath. "He's already tried to burn down my house. What's next? Do we wait until someone gets hurt?" Grenville opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Seren. "And you're willing to do this?" She thought about the library, reduced to ash and smoke. Thought about Lily, terrified and shaking but brave enough to tell the truth anyway. Thought about every sleepless night she'd spent looking over her shoulder, wondering when he'd find her. "Yes," she said. "I'm willing." "Then you're both insane." Grenville sat back down heavily. "But if you're determined to do this, at least let me help plan it properly. We'll need a distraction, a way in and out, and a backup plan in case something goes wrong." "Something will go wrong," Marta said from the doorway. She'd been listening the whole time, arms crossed and expression grim. "It always does, but I suppose that's never stopped any of you before." The Duke looked at her. "You disapprove." "I think it's a terrible idea that's probably going to get you both arrested." She stepped into the room. "But I also think it's the only idea we've got. So yes, I'll help. Someone needs to keep you two from doing something completely stupid." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Grenville drew up detailed plans of the estate based on Seren's descriptions, marking entry points and potential escape routes. Marta gathered supplies: dark clothing, rope, a small lantern with a shutter to hide the light. The Duke reviewed every detail with the precision of a military commander, asking questions, adjusting plans, making sure nothing was left to chance. Seren watched it all with a growing sense of unreality. This was actually happening. She was actually going to break into her stepfather's house and steal evidence that could destroy him. A month ago, she'd been too terrified to even say his name out loud. Now she was planning a heist. "Second thoughts?" the Duke asked quietly. They were alone in his study, the others having gone to prepare for the journey. "About 1,000 of them," Seren admitted, "but I'm still doing it." "You don't have to. I can go alone." "No, you can't. You don't know the house. You'd be wandering around in the dark hoping you stumbled across the right room." She met his gaze. "I have to do this, not just for me, for everyone else he's hurt. That's a heavy burden to carry. I've been carrying it for years. At least now I'm doing something about it." The Duke studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small knife in a leather sheath. "Take this, just in case." Seren took it, the weight solid and reassuring in her hand. "Have you done this before? Breaking into houses?" "Once or twice when I was younger and significantly more reckless." "And now?" "Now I'm older and only moderately more reckless." He almost smiled. "We'll be fine. In and out before anyone knows we were there." She wanted to believe him, but she'd learned the hard way that plans rarely survived contact with reality. They left just after midnight, the house dark and quiet behind them. The Duke had arranged for a carriage to take them most of the way, but they'd walk the last mile to avoid being seen. Seren wore dark trousers and a plain shirt borrowed from one of the stable boys, her hair tucked under a cap. The Duke was similarly dressed, all traces of nobility stripped away. The night was cold and clear, stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. Seren's breath fogged in the air as they walked, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every sound made her jump. "Relax," the Duke murmured. "If you're this tense, you'll make mistakes." "Easy for you to say. You're not walking back into your own personal hell." "No, I'm walking into someone else's, which is arguably worse, since I don't know what to expect." Despite everything, Seren almost laughed. "You're trying to distract me. Is it working?" "A little." They reached the edge of the property just after 1 in the morning. The house loomed ahead, dark except for a single light in an upstairs window. The servants' quarters, Seren guessed. Everyone else would be asleep. "That's his study," she whispered, pointing to a window on the ground floor. "Second from the left. The window doesn't lock properly. I used to open it when the room got too hot. Can you get it open from the outside?" "I think so." They circled around to the side of the house, staying low and quiet. The grass was damp, soaking through Seren's boots. Her hands were shaking again, but she forced them steady as she reached the window and pressed her fingers against the frame. It was stuck. "Damn it!" she hissed, pushing harder. "It won't budge." The Duke moved beside her, pulling a thin metal tool from his pocket. "Let me!" He slid the tool into the gap between the frame and the sill, working it carefully. After a moment, something clicked, and the window swung inward. "How did you—" "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to." He boosted himself up and through the window, then reached back to help her. Seren tumbled through less gracefully, landing hard on the floor of her stepfather's study. The room smelled exactly as she remembered, leather and tobacco and something sour underneath. Bile rose in her throat. "Where's the desk?" the Duke whispered. She pointed. He moved toward it, pulling the shielded lantern from his pack and opening it just enough to cast a narrow beam of light. The desk was massive, carved oak with ornate handles. The bottom drawer was locked. The Duke knelt and examined the lock, then pulled out his tools again. Seren kept watch at the door, her heart pounding so loud she was sure someone would hear it. "Got it," the Duke said. The drawer slid open with a soft creak. Seren crossed the room and looked inside. There it was, the ledger, exactly where she remembered. She pulled it out, hands trembling, and opened it to a random page. Columns of numbers, dates, names, all in her stepfather's neat, precise handwriting. "This is it," she breathed. "This is everything. Then let's go." They were halfway to the window when footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Seren froze. The Duke grabbed her arm and pulled her behind the desk, snuffing the lantern. The room plunged into darkness. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Then the door opened. Light flooded in from a candle. Seren pressed herself against the desk, barely breathing. Through the narrow gap between the desk and the wall, she could see a figure moving across the room, her stepfather, wearing a nightshirt and carrying the candle in one hand. He stopped at the window, looked out, then turned and surveyed the room. "I know someone's here," he said quietly. "I heard the window." The Duke's hand tightened on Seren's arm. She could feel his pulse, steady and controlled. Her own was a wild, erratic thing, threatening to give her away. Her stepfather moved to the desk, set the candle down, reached for the bottom drawer, the empty bottom drawer. He froze. Then he straightened, his face hardening into something cold and furious. "You," he said. "You little thief, you came back." Seren didn't move, didn't breathe. "I know you're in here. I can smell the fear on you." He walked around the desk slowly, deliberately. "Come out. Let's settle this like adults." The Duke shifted beside her, and she knew he was about to do something reckless. She grabbed his wrist, shook her head frantically, but he pulled away, standing in one smooth motion. "She's not alone," the Duke said. Her stepfather spun, the candle nearly dropping from his hand. "You! What the hell are you doing in my house?" "Retrieving stolen property. That ledger is mine." "That ledger," the Duke said, "is evidence of fraud, embezzlement, and half a dozen other crimes I'm sure the authorities would be very interested in. You broke into my home. You're the criminal here. Call the constable then. Let's see whose story they believe." For a moment, her stepfather just stared. Then he laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You arrogant bastard. You think your title protects you from everything, don't you?" "No, I think the truth protects me. And right now the truth is that you're a liar, a thief, and a man who tried to sell his stepdaughter to the highest bidder." The Duke stepped forward. "That ledger proves it, and if you try to stop us from leaving with it, I'll make sure every person in this county knows exactly what kind of man you are." "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." The silence stretched. Seren could see her stepfather's hand shaking, his jaw tight with rage. But underneath the rage was something else, something that looked almost like fear. "Get out," he said finally. "Both of you, before I change my mind." The Duke didn't move. "Not good enough. I want your word that you'll leave Seren alone. No more letters, no more threats, no more lies. You walk away and never look back." "And if I refuse?" "Then I take this ledger to the magistrate in the morning and let them sort it out." Her stepfather's eyes flicked to Seren, still half hidden behind the desk. "You really think you've won, don't you? You think running to this man makes you safe?" "I think," Seren said, standing, "I'm done being afraid of you." His expression twisted. "You ungrateful little—" "Enough!" The Duke's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Do we have a deal or not?" Her stepfather stared at them both. Then he turned and walked to the door. "Fine. Take the damn ledger. Take her too, for all I care. But don't come crying to me when she stabs you in the back." "I'll take my chances." He left, slamming the door behind him. Seren's legs nearly gave out. The Duke caught her arm, steadying her. "We need to go," he said. "Now." They climbed out the window and ran. Sam. They didn't stop until they were back at the carriage, both of them breathing hard. Seren clutched the ledger to her chest, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and something that felt dangerously close to triumph. "We did it," she said. "We actually did it." "We did." The Duke leaned back against the carriage, scrubbing a hand over his face. "That was the most reckless thing I've ever done." "You said you'd done this before." "I lied. I wanted you to feel confident. Despite everything, despite the fear and the danger and the fact that they'd just committed a felony, Seren laughed, actually laughed, loud and wild and free. The Duke looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Then slowly, he started laughing too. They made it back to Thornwood just before dawn, exhausted and filthy but alive. Grenville met them at the door, took one look at the ledger, and smiled. "This," he said, "is better than I hoped." It took Grenville 3 days to go through the ledger and compile a report. When he was finished, he presented it to the Duke with the kind of grim satisfaction usually reserved for winning a war. "He's done," Grenville said. "Fraud, tax evasion, bribery of public officials. If we take this to the authorities, he'll be arrested within the week." "Good," the Duke said. "Then let's make sure everyone knows about it first." "What do you mean?" "I mean, we don't just destroy him legally. We destroy him socially. I want every member of the gentry, every business associate, every person who ever shook his hand to know what he's done." Seren frowned. "That's not just revenge. That's annihilation." "Yes," the Duke said. "It is." She should have objected, should have said it was too much, too cruel, but she thought about the fire, about the lies, about every person he'd hurt over the years, and she couldn't bring herself to care. "When?" she asked. "The summer gala, 2 weeks from now. Everyone who's anyone will be there. We'll present the evidence publicly with witnesses and documentation. He won't be able to lie his way out of it. He'll retaliate. Let him try. By the time we're done, he won't have the power or the credibility to do anything." But the 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Grenville worked with a team of investigators to verify every entry in the ledger, building an ironclad case. Marta helped Seren prepare for the gala, insisting she needed to look the part. You're not a victim anymore, Marta said, pinning up her hair. You're a survivor, and you need to look like someone who can't be broken. I don't feel like that. Then fake it. Confidence is half the battle. The night of the gala, Seren stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized herself. The dress was deep burgundy, elegant without being ostentatious. Her hair was swept up, a few loose curls framing her face. She looked older, stronger, like someone who could stand in a room full of people and tell the truth without flinching. The Duke appeared in the doorway, dressed in formal black. He stopped when he saw her. You look... He trailed off. Terrified? Formidable. She turned to face him. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can. He crossed the room and took her hand. You've already survived the worst he could throw at you. This is just the final step. And if it doesn't work, then we'll figure out something else. But it will work, I promise. She wanted to believe him, and maybe, for the first time, she did. The gala was held at the county's largest estate, a sprawling mansion lit up like a chandelier. Carriages lined the drive, nobles and gentry filing in wearing their finest. Seren felt every eye on her as she entered on the Duke's arm, whispers following in their wake. Is that her? The thief? I heard she seduced him. Shameless. Seren kept her head high, her expression neutral. The Duke squeezed her hand once, a silent reassurance. They made their way to the center of the ballroom, where a small stage had been set up for announcements. The Duke stepped up, and the room gradually fell silent. Thank you all for coming, he began. I know this is supposed to be a celebration, but I'm afraid I have something rather serious to discuss. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Seren saw her stepfather near the back, his face already darkening with suspicion. Over the past few weeks, the Duke continued, I've become aware of certain irregularities involving one of our community members, specifically Mr. Cornelius Harrow. Her stepfather went rigid. These irregularities include fraud, embezzlement, and the bribery of public officials. I have documentation to support these claims, verified by multiple independent sources. The room erupted, people shouting, demanding explanations, turning to stare at her stepfather. He stood frozen, his face white with rage. That's a lie, he shouted. He's fabricating evidence to protect his whore. Actually, Grenville said, stepping onto the stage with the ledger, the evidence came from your own records. Your handwriting, your signature, your seal. Would you like to examine it? This is absurd. Furthermore, the Duke said, his voice cutting through the chaos, I have witnessed testimony from multiple former employees detailing illegal practices, unpaid wages, and unsafe working conditions, all of which can be corroborated. Seren watched her stepfather's face crumble, watched the crowd turn against him, their expressions shifting from confusion to disgust. This was it, the moment she'd been fighting for. You're finished, the Duke said quietly. Leave now, or I'll have you arrested on the spot. Her stepfather looked around the room at all the faces staring back at him with contempt. Then he looked at Seren. For a moment, she thought he might lunge at her, might try one last desperate attack. But he didn't. He just turned and walked out, shoulders hunched, defeated. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then someone started clapping, then another, then the whole room erupted into applause. Seren stood there, stunned, as people came up to congratulate her, to apologize for believing the lies, to shake her hand and tell her she was brave. The Duke appeared at her side, his expression unreadable. How do you feel? Like I can finally breathe, she said. Good, because we're not done yet. She looked at him, confused. What do you mean? I mean there's still work to do, people to help, wrongs to right. He held out his hand. Are you with me? She took his hand without hesitation. Always. She took his hand without hesitation. Always. The applause continued, washing over them like a wave. But Seren barely heard it. Her mind was already moving forward past the victory, past the vindication, to something she hadn't let herself think about until now. What came next? The Duke seemed to sense it. He leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. We should leave before they start asking questions we're not ready to answer. Like what? Like what our relationship actually is. Heat crept up her neck. We don't have a relationship. You're my employer. Is that what we're calling it? Before she could answer, Lady Whitmore, one of the county's most influential matrons, descended on them with the precision of a hunting bird. Your Grace, Miss Vale, what a revelation this evening has been. Simply extraordinary. Thank you, Lady Whitmore, the Duke said smoothly. I must say I had my doubts about Miss Vale when those terrible rumors were circulating, but clearly I was mistaken. She turned to Seren with an expression that might have been apologetic if it had reached her eyes. You've shown remarkable courage, my dear, standing up to that dreadful man. I didn't do it alone, Seren said. No, of course not. His Grace has been most protective. Lady Whitmore's gaze flicked between them, calculating. One does wonder what arrangements you've made for the future. Will you be staying at Thornwood indefinitely? There it was, the real question underneath all the pleasantries. Miss Vale's position is secure for as long as she wishes to remain, the Duke said. The library restoration is far from complete. How fortuitous! Lady Whitmore's smile sharpened. And how modern of you, Your Grace, to keep such an accomplished young woman in your household. I'm sure there will be no shortage of eligible young men eager to make her acquaintance now that her reputation has been restored. I'm not looking for a husband, Seren said flatly. Every woman is looking for a husband, dear, even if she doesn't know it yet. Lady Whitmore patted her arm. But there's no rush, I suppose. You're still quite young. The Duke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. If you'll excuse us, Lady Whitmore, Miss Vale has had an exhausting evening. Of course, of course. She drifted away, already scanning the room for her next target. Seren exhaled slowly. That was awful. That was society. Get used to it. I'd rather not. They made their way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and deflecting invasive questions with practiced ease. But by the time they reached the carriage, Serene's face hurt from forcing smiles, and her head throbbed with tension. The ride back to Thornwood was quiet. The Duke stared out the window, his expression distant. Seren watched him, trying to read the thoughts behind that carefully controlled facade. You're angry, she said finally. I'm not angry. You look angry. He turned to face her. I'm frustrated. There's a difference. About what? About the fact that we just exposed a criminal, cleared your name, and dismantled years of lies. And somehow the most interesting thing to these people is whether or not you're sleeping with me. Seren's cheeks burned. Well, are we? The Duke blinked. What? Are we? Sleeping together? She forced herself to meet his gaze. Because I think we need to be clear about what this is. What we are. He stopped. Started again. I hired you to restore a library. And then you defended me against my stepfather, broke into his house, risked your reputation, and publicly destroyed him. That's not employer behavior. That's something else. What do you want me to say? I want you to tell me the truth. Her voice cracked slightly. Because I can't keep pretending I don't feel... She stopped herself. Too much. Too fast. The Duke leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You want the truth? Fine. I care about you, more than I should, more than is probably wise, and I have no idea what to do about it. Why not? Because I'm not, He exhaled sharply. I'm not good at this. At letting people close. The last person I let close died because I wasn't there to protect her. I won't make that mistake again. I'm not asking you to protect me. Then what are you asking? I'm asking you to trust me. To stop treating me like I'm made of glass or like I'm going to disappear if you turn your back. She reached across the space between them and took his hand. I'm asking you to let me stay. Not as an employee. As something more. The Duke stared at their joined hands. You deserve better than a man who can't even admit what he feels. Maybe, but I get to decide what I deserve, not you, not anyone else. She squeezed his hand. So stop deciding for me. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, he lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and tender it made her chest ache. I'm terrible at this, he said quietly. I noticed. And I'll probably mess it up. I'm counting on it. He almost smiled. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. You've mentioned that before. This time he did smile, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. The charges against her stepfather were filed the following week. Grenville presented the evidence to the magistrate with the kind of clinical precision that left no room for doubt or appeal. By the end of the month, Cornelius Harrow was facing trial for fraud, embezzlement, and a dozen other crimes that would likely see him imprisoned for years. Seren attended the first hearing. She sat in the gallery, hands folded in her lap, and watched him be led into the courtroom in chains. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. All the power and menace that had defined him for so long stripped away, leaving only a bitter old man facing the consequences of his choices. He saw her. Their eyes met across the room. She waited for the fear to come, the instinct to look away, to make herself small. But it didn't. Instead, she held his gaze steadily until he was the one who looked away. How do you feel? The Duke asked as they left the courthouse. Like it's finally over. Is it? She considered that. I don't know. Maybe it'll never be completely over. Maybe I'll always be looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next threat. But at least now I know I can handle it. You can. He glanced at her. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. I had good teachers. He didn't respond, but his hand found hers, and they walked back to the carriage in comfortable silence. 3 weeks after the trial began, Lily came to see Seren. She looked better, less pale, less haunted. She'd found work at a dressmaker's shop in town, and the steady employment seemed to have given her back some of what she'd lost. I wanted to thank you, Lily said. They were in the library, surrounded by half-restored books and the smell of leather and paper. For giving me the courage to speak up. I don't think I could have done it without you. You did it yourself, Seren said. I just gave you the opportunity. Still, Lily looked around the library, taking in the progress Seren had made. This is beautiful. You've done amazing work here. It's not finished yet. Will it ever be? Seren smiled. Probably not. There's always another book to restore, another shelf to organize. But that's what I like about it. It's never done, so I never have to stop. Lily nodded slowly. I heard people talking in town about you and the Duke. What are they saying? That you're going to marry him. Seren nearly dropped the book she was holding. What? It's just gossip, but people seem convinced. They say he looks at you like... She paused. Like you're the only person in the room. That's ridiculous. Is it? Before Seren could answer, the Duke himself appeared in the doorway. Miss Carter, good to see you again. Your Grace, Lily curtsied quickly. I was just leaving. Thank you again, Miss Vale. She hurried out, leaving Seren alone with the Duke and a conversation she wasn't ready to have. What did she want? The Duke asked. To say thank you, and apparently to inform me that the entire county thinks we're getting married. He went still. And what do you think? I think people should mind their own business. That's not an answer. Seren set down the book and turned to face him fully. What do you want me to say? That I've thought about it? That I lie awake at night wondering if you're thinking about it too? Because I have. And I do. Seren, but I'm not going to push you. I know you're not ready. Maybe you'll never be ready. And if that's the case, I can live with it. I'd rather have you in my life as a friend than not have you at all. The Duke crossed the room in 3 long strides and took her face in his hands. I'm not good at this, he said, at saying what I mean, but I need you to understand something. What? You terrify me. His thumb brushed across her cheek. The thought of losing you, of failing you the way I failed her, it keeps me up at night. But the thought of not having you in my life is worse. So yes, I've thought about it. About marrying you, about building a life together, and it scares the hell out of me. But I'm willing to be scared if it means I get to keep you. Seren's breath caught. Is that a proposal? It's a terrible one if it is. It's the worst proposal I've ever heard. Should I try again? No. She reached up and pulled him down into a kiss, their first, clumsy and desperate and perfect. I don't need poetry or grand gestures. I just need you to mean it. I mean it, he said against her lips. I mean every word. They were married 6 months later, in a small ceremony at Thornwood with only close friends and staff in attendance. Seren wore a simple dress, no veil, no elaborate trappings. The Duke wore black, as always, but he smiled more that day than she'd seen in all the months since she'd known him. Marta cried. Grenville looked genuinely pleased. Even the servants who'd been wary of Seren at first seemed happy for them. The reception was held in the library, at Seren's insistence. It seemed fitting somehow to celebrate in the place where she'd first proven herself, where she'd carved out a space in a house that hadn't wanted her. This is where it started, the Duke said, pulling her aside during the dancing. You, standing in the doorway with bleeding knuckles, demanding I give you a chance. And you, looking at me like I was a stray cat that wandered in from the storm. I was right to be suspicious. Excuse me? You did exactly what I was afraid of. You got under my skin, made me care, and now I can't imagine my life without you. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You're dangerous. Good. She kissed him. Keep it that way. But marriage didn't erase the past. It didn't magically fix everything or make the hard parts disappear. 3 months after the wedding, Seren woke in the middle of the night gasping for air, caught in the grip of a nightmare where her stepfather had found her, dragged her back, locked her away. The Duke held her while she shook, murmuring reassurances that didn't quite reach the panic clawing at her chest. He can't hurt you anymore, he said. He's in prison. He's gone. I know that, but my body doesn't. Then we'll teach it. He pressed his forehead to hers. However long it takes. It took months. Slowly, painfully, she learned to sleep without waking in terror. Learned to walk through the house without checking over her shoulder. Learned to trust that the safety she'd found wasn't temporary, wasn't conditional, wasn't going to be ripped away the moment she let her guard down. And the Duke, who'd spent years keeping everyone at arm's length, learned to let her see him vulnerable, to admit when he was struggling, when the memories of his first wife threatened to drag him under. They stumbled through it together, two people who'd been broken in different ways trying to figure out how to be whole. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and hard, and sometimes they fought, shouting matches that ended with slammed doors and tense silences. But they always came back, always talked it through, always chose each other, even when it would have been easier to walk away. A year after the wedding, Seren proposed an idea. They were in the library. Where else? When she brought it up. I want to open the estate to others. People like me, who need somewhere safe to go. The Duke looked up from the correspondence he was reviewing. What do you mean? I mean women running from bad situations, girls with nowhere else to turn. We have the space, the resources. We could give them what you gave me, a chance to rebuild. That's a significant undertaking. I know, but it's important. How many people are out there right now, desperate and alone, with no one willing to take a risk on them? She leaned against his desk. You took a risk on me. Let me pay that forward. He studied her for a long moment. Then he set down his pen. All right, on one condition. What? You let me help. This isn't just your project, it's ours. Seren's throat tightened. You'd do that? I married you, didn't I? That means your causes are my causes. Your dreams are my dreams. He stood and pulled her into his arms. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't work yourself to death trying to save everyone single-handedly. I don't do that. You absolutely do that. She laughed despite herself. Fine. Partners then? Partners. The refuge opened quietly 6 months later. They didn't make a grand announcement or seek public acclaim. Instead, they worked with solicitors, magistrates, and parish officials to identify women who needed help. The first resident was a girl of 19 who'd fled an arranged marriage. The second was a widow whose late husband's family had tried to steal her inheritance. The third was a woman escaping a violent household with 2 children in tow. Seren met with each of them personally, offering what she could: a safe place to stay, resources to rebuild, connections to find work. Some stayed for weeks, others for months. A few chose to stay on permanently, helping run the refuge and support new arrivals. It wasn't easy. There were logistics to manage, personalities that clashed, moments of crisis when someone's past came knocking. But Seren had learned how to handle crisis. And more importantly, she'd learned she didn't have to handle it alone. The Duke was there every step of the way. Not hovering, not controlling, but supporting. He dealt with the legal complications, the financial arrangements, the inevitable pushback from people who thought the whole enterprise was scandalous or inappropriate. And when Seren doubted herself, when she wondered if she was in over her head, if she was doing more harm than good, he reminded her why it mattered. "You're giving them what I gave you," he said one evening. They were sitting in the library, reviewing applications for new residents. Not just shelter, hope. "I don't know if hope is enough. It's a start, and sometimes that's all people need, a place to start over." 2 years after the refuge opened, Lily came back to visit. She brought her fiancé, a kind-faced carpenter who looked at her like she hung the moon. They were getting married in the spring, she said, and she wanted Seren to be there. "You changed my life," Lily said. They were walking through the gardens, the autumn air crisp and golden. "I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't given me the courage to speak up." "You would have found it eventually," Seren said. "You're stronger than you think." "Maybe, but I wouldn't have found it as quickly or as safely." Lily stopped and turned to face her. "I heard you're expecting." Seren's hand went automatically to her stomach, where a barely there swell was just beginning to show. "How did you—" "Marta mentioned it when I wrote to her. Congratulations." "Thank you." Seren smiled. "I'm terrified." "You'll be a wonderful mother." "I don't know the first thing about being a mother. Mine died when I was 12, and my stepmother—" She stopped. "I don't have any good examples." "Then you'll make your own, just like you did with everything else." Lily squeezed her hand. "You've already saved so many people. Your child will be lucky to have you." The baby came in early spring, a girl with dark hair and the Duke's gray eyes. They named her Eleanor after the Duke's first wife. It felt right somehow, honoring the past while building something new. The Duke held her like she was made of spun glass, his expression a mixture of wonder and terror. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Neither do I," Seren admitted, "but we'll figure it out together. What if I fail? What if something happens? Then we'll deal with it together." She took his hand, placed it on Eleanor's tiny back. "We don't have to be perfect. We just have to be present." He looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression cracked open. "How did I get so lucky?" "Luck had nothing to do with it. You opened your door in the middle of a storm and took a chance on a girl with bleeding knuckles and a forged reference." She smiled. "Best decision you ever made." "Second best," he corrected. "The best was asking you to marry me." That was a terrible proposal." "It worked, didn't it?" Eleanor made a small noise somewhere between a whimper and a sigh. They both froze, waiting to see if she'd wake, but she just shifted slightly and settled back into sleep. "We're gonna mess this up," the Duke whispered. "Probably, but we'll mess it up together, and we'll keep trying until we get it right." 5 years later, the refuge had grown into something neither of them had quite imagined. 23 women and their children called Thornwood home at any given time. They'd added 2 new wings to accommodate everyone, along with a schoolroom, a workshop for teaching trades, and a legal office staffed by solicitors who volunteered their time. Seren still ran the library, still restored books and organized collections and lost herself in the smell of leather and old paper. But now she did it with Eleanor at her side, teaching her daughter the same skills she'd learned, passing down the knowledge that had saved her life. "Why do we have to be so careful with them?" Eleanor asked one afternoon. She was 6 now, all endless questions and boundless energy. "Because books are precious," Seren said. "They hold stories, knowledge, pieces of people who came before us. When we take care of them, we're honoring that. Like how Papa honors Mama Eleanor." Seren's chest tightened. They'd told her about her namesake, the Duke's first wife who'd died too young. Eleanor had accepted it with the kind of straightforward logic only children possessed. "Yes, exactly like that. Do you think she'd like me?" "I think she'd love you." Eleanor considered this, then went back to carefully turning the pages of the manuscript in front of her. Seren watched her daughter work, this fierce, bright little person who'd never known what it meant to be afraid in her own home, who'd never had to run or hide or fight for the right to exist. That alone made everything worth it. The Duke found them there as the sun was setting, light streaming through the windows and turning everything gold. He leaned in the doorway, watching them with an expression Seren had learned to recognize, contentment mixed with something deeper, something that looked like peace. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Nothing. Just thinking." "About what?" "About how I almost didn't let you in that night. How close I came to turning you away. You would have been stuck with a destroyed library and no one to fix it. I would have been stuck with a destroyed life and no one to fix that either." He crossed the room and kissed the top of Eleanor's head, then Seren's. "You saved me. I don't think I've ever properly thanked you for that." "You don't need to thank me. You saved me first. Then we're even." "Papa, look!" Eleanor held up the manuscript. "I found a mistake. See? The margin note is in the wrong place." The Duke examined it seriously. "You're absolutely right. Well done." Eleanor beamed. "Can I fix it?" "Not yet. But someday when you're older, I'll teach you how." He glanced at Seren. "If your mother approves, of course." "I approve," Seren said. "On one condition." "What's that?" "That we teach her everything. Not just the restoration, but the why. Why books matter, why stories matter, why it's important to preserve them for the people who come after us." "Deal." They stayed there until the light faded and Eleanor's questions finally slowed. Then they walked together through the house, past the refuge residents gathered in the common room, past the staff preparing dinner, past the library with its endless rows of saved and salvaged books, and into the warm, familiar comfort of the life they'd built. It wasn't the life Seren had imagined when she'd pounded on that door in the middle of the storm. It was better. Messier, harder, more complicated, but better. Because she'd learned something in the years since that night. Survival wasn't the end goal. It was just the beginning. The real work came after, building a life worth living, creating spaces where others could do the same, turning pain into purpose. She looked at the Duke, at Eleanor, at the home they'd made from broken pieces. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she'd finally found where she belonged. Not because someone had rescued her, but because she'd rescued herself. And then, piece by piece, she'd built something strong enough to last. The storm that had brought her here was long past, but its legacy remained in every book she restored, every woman she helped, every moment of peace she claimed as her own. She'd arrived with nothing but bleeding knuckles and desperate courage, and she'd turned it into everything. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was home.